Welcome to Through the Noise. I'm your host, Ernesto Glucksman. My next guest used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers as an accountant, and then she jumped ship into a startup company that is creating a software platform for calculating carbon. So I had a lot of questions about the market, about what she's facing and her career path. Let's get started with the episode. Lizzy, thank you for joining me on the Zoom across the pond. Where are you? You're in England.
Yeah, in England. I'm based in London. Actually in the office today, which has been really lovely. Obviously we've been working from home for a while, which has been nice for me. I recently got a puppy, so have been looking after her at home. But now in the office, now in the office, and good to be back with the team.
Okay. You're Lizzy Almond. You're a carbon accounting lead. Congratulations on the promotion there for Emitwise, which is an accounting. That's like software for managing your values, supply chain, and calculating your carbon footprint, right? Of these items passing through it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We are building a software to automatically calculate a company's carbon footprint. And the best thing about our software is that we calculate a full scope of the company's carbon footprint. It's not just the kind of scope 1 and scope 2. I can go into kind of what those are kind of when we start a bit more with the podcast. But the biggest part is their scope 3, which is a company's whole value chain, which goes from you buying your purchased goods and services through to your employee commuting, through to the waste you generate. Literally anything you think of has an emissions associated to it. And that's what we pride ourselves on calculating.
Okay. So I think in Europe is a little bit more ahead of tabulating carbon, figuring out the cost of carbon and things than the United States, because it's a big country, there's a lot of space. We don't have quite figured out all of it, but so it's just interesting to hear from folks like you. But also what I was excited about talking to you is that you're an accountant from PricewaterhouseCoopers. I mean, that's where you started.
Yeah.
And then somehow you ended up, I don't know what an industrial placement person is, but maybe give us a little bit of how this happened to you.
Yeah, of course. If I'm completely honest, I think I initially almost stumbled into the accounting scene, as you could call it. So at university, I studied economics. And of course, I've always had a big passion for sustainability. I think that comes from kind of growing up in the countryside, and my dad's a big fan of nature. He's a big fan of bird watching and gardening. So that's kind of what I grew up around. And that's where my love for the environment stemmed from. So yeah, as I said, I went to university, studied economics, which obviously very money focused. But I took on sustainability related modules where possible, such as business and climate change, development economics, which were all really interesting. However, it came to the course I did, which is what you alluded to, was an industrial placement course. So what I mean by that is I did my first 2 years at university. I then took a year out and had to go work somewhere. And then once I finished my year at work, I would come back and do a final year at university to finish my degree, which is a really exciting opportunity and a great way to do your course. However, I found myself at the right age of 19, starting my second year, thinking I now need to find a job. And for my placement year, and I think I did what any maybe naive, fresh-faced 19-year-old thought when it came to looking for a job. And I just Googled top 100 graduate programs in the UK, preferably London. And PwC came up. And apparently it's very good to get a accounting qualification. So initially I did a shadow female leader program with them, which was really interesting. And then I applied and got my placement year at PwC. So I joined them for my industrial placement year. I started as a financial auditor, and I sat, I'm not sure if you know about it, but in the UK, we have a what we call the ACA, which is the qualification to become a chartered accountant. Lots of exams. So I started in my first year, I did half my exams, and kind of started my financial audit career. And then after that, I went back to university, did my final year. And then when it came to leaving university, because I'd already done my first year of chartered accountancy with PwC, I got offered to go back to them to finish my qualification. And I thought to myself, there's no point me wasting those hours and hours of revision that I did to pass those 10 exams to then not complete my qualification. So I went back and finished my qualification and carried on with my financial audit, which I definitely learned a lot. And, I have a very analytical mind and mathematical mind. So that was very interesting. And I worked with some really cool clients. We focused on the FTSE 100, so big customers, and then also worked with a handful of charities, which was super interesting. However, once I finished my accounting year, my accounting qualification, it kind of occurred to me that even though I spent the last 3 years doing financial audit, finance isn't exactly my passion. And in fact, sustainability is. Yeah, exactly.
Bean counting, the money counting part, not passionate about that. Okay. But you acquired all these like counting, auditing, like sleuthing through the data skills. So what did you want to then count? Okay, carbon. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think, the analytical side of it, really interesting. The measuring of, or like the verification of companies' books, less interesting for me. It's very
margins,
the profit is not really there, and it's also always looking at historical data, which I find quite frustrating. And you're almost just you're kind of correcting the company's homework, which isn't as fun. So I kind of started thinking, okay, so what am I passionate about? And I'm passionate about the climate crisis and ending it. And luckily at PwC, we had a very, a strong growing department in sustainability assurance. So, I did a bit of grafting, did a bit of networking, then applied to do a transfer, went through quite a long interview process, and then finally got accepted to move to our sustainability assurance team. And what I mean by sustainability assurance, it's kind of all the reporting which companies do, which isn't financial. So if you open a company's annual accounts, obviously the financial side of it will take up a lot of the space, but there's about half of it, which goes to non-financial reporting. And that's kind of what my job was now, was to audit the non-financial side of things. My passion is carbon. For me, that's our number one enemy when it comes to the climate crisis. So I asked to do carbon accounting, carbon audit, and then I ended up assuring some FTSE 100 companies and the carbon footprint that they were reporting. And I was able to work with some really cool customers. My main customers were Unilever, and obviously they're such like a driver in the sustainability field. I also worked with HSBC. And then
like little companies, little ones, right?
Yeah, just small ones. It was really fun measuring their footprints.
Can I ask, is it a little bit of a paradigm shift? Because you're like, on one hand, when you're doing the money counting, you're hoping to count more and more of it, right? But then you go to counting carbon, you're like hoping to count less and less of it. Like you just want the numbers to be smaller, right?
They get smaller and smaller.
Yeah. But fundamentally, accounting, general, what GAAP, right? General accounting, whatever principles. I mean, this is just established from 200, 300, 400 years of accounting that the world's been doing with their money, right? Like PwC's got to figure it out in that world. But what's it like in terms of collecting data related to actual tonnage of carbon that products or processes generate? Like that part seems like right now is a little bit Wild West. It doesn't seem like it's totally grounded quite the right way. And so how do you do accounting in that atmosphere, or what's happening there would be nice to know.
Sure. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm not going to lie to you. It is a really hard beast that we're trying to tackle. As you said, financial accounting is so established. And the other thing with financial accounting is it's so regulated and it's mandatory for large companies to get audited. However, when you go to carbon accounting, it's kind of been developed in the last 10 years, not the last 100 years. We do have a protocol, which us carbon accountants is our Bible. We ride or die by that, which is called the GHG protocol. And
what is it?
It's called the greenhouse gas protocol.
Okay. And where's that come from?
I couldn't tell you that if I'm completely honest. I know it's a verified body who we all trust.
Okay. But that's generally, it's the current standard that looks.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the current standards. And when I was with PwC, we were auditing against the GHG protocol and obviously our set of auditing standards. But that is the internationally recognized acceptable standards. And yeah, that does break down each scope and category and how you should calculate it and what your raw data is. And then, there are different levels of accuracy in terms of what emission factors you can apply and what raw data you can gather. So that's really helpful. However, the kind of struggles we face with carbon accounting is the GHG protocol it's great, but it's fairly vague. I think people can interpret it in different ways. Whereas with financial audit, it's very black and white. There's a set of rules and you have to follow it. With the GHG protocol, there is some gray areas, which is interesting. I think it results in a lot of kind of interesting conversations that I have with my peers, and we really discuss in depth and thinking where it comes from. The other issue we face with carbon accounting and carbon reporting specifically is, as I said, it's mandatory for companies to report their profit and loss in their balance sheet. It's not mandatory for companies to report their carbon emissions. It does change in each country. For the UK, it has to be considered a large company, and then large companies need to report it, which is great. But then even if they do report it, it's not mandatory for their footprint to get audited, which then results in kind of how do you know that they're calculating an accurate carbon footprint? It's also this funny thing with carbon accounting. A company can almost set their own reporting standards. So they can kind of almost cherry pick what they do report on. And then also it's not mandatory to be audited. So it can result in a lot of companies. You'll see a lot of companies, claiming they're net zero. However,
So is there an analogy here? It's kind of like they're all playing a game that everybody's making up their own rules for, and there's no actual referee even checking between everybody's rule book to see if they've actually scored a win or not.
Absolutely. That's the perfect way to phrase it. And the kind of like going with the kind of net zero aspect of it, with the GHG protocol, to measure carbon, it's not currently recognized to allow offsetting. So when I measure my footprint, if I then say, oh yeah, but I've saved 100 tons by planting a forest, with the GHG protocol, you can't net that off. So you would still have to show your full carbon footprint. And then underneath it, you can disclose saying, however, we have planted a forest, so it's offsetted X amount of carbon. But the offsetting world isn't highly regarded by, well, personally, and from my peers, it's not highly regarded by the kind of best thing to do in our current scenario.
I mean, okay. So I'm not trying to pass any judgment on any of this. I mean, this is all new for industry. So they probably just start setting a bunch of rules without actually knowing the implications is probably not the way it works. And then my understanding, I mean, regulation doesn't happen until there's proven malfeasance.
Something bad happened.
Something's bad happened. Now we know what not to do. Let's put that stoplight at the corner where there was a car accident, right? Like they don't they don't put stoplights just anywhere. There's like specific, like you have to have something sort of happen to make it, to drive that. So that's why people get frustrated with regulation being too slow, perhaps in this world, right? It's kind of like, well, where is it? But but this seems kind of a disappointing piece of news to hear that you can't offset efforts. But can you? Okay, but okay. Let's go to an example. So let's just say I'm making batteries, and the plastic I use to encase the battery material. I have two. Let's just real simple. I have two suppliers. One of them makes the standard cheap plastic that I can just get from raw materials, and the other one makes a little bit more expensive, but they're reusing plastic, right? So they're claiming that it has a lower ultimate carbon footprint than the incumbent. All right, I want to get that, but I don't want to just get that. I want to be able to then say I am using that material, and I want to be able to allocate that into my carbon process. Is that an offset that I can or can't calculate into my efforts and my reporting?
You say you picked a simple example. I would argue that's actually quite complicated.
We're in trouble here, Lizzy. This world, we need more of you.
Need more of us. We need, to be honest, you don't need more of me. You need Emitwise.
Okay, all right.
Not to flag. I think that's what we're tackling. Emitwise, that's what we're tackling. We're trying to make the calculations more simple, automated, and then we can take this frustration away from customers. And then they will be able to, I think what I find baffling is we have so many passionate people in the sustainability industry, but they have to waste so much time trying to calculate their emissions and then report it. And just think about the benefit if they didn't have to do that and they could put their great mindset to, okay, how do we actually reduce the emissions? So yeah, I think we need Emitwise, and that's what we're tackling. But just circling back to your example, a brief explanation is one thing is just because plastic is recycled, that doesn't necessarily make it use less or produce fewer carbon emissions. In most instances, it will actually produce more because you need to melt your plastic and then reshape it. The whole kind of recycling side of things, that's more tackling the problem to do with waste, and we are wasting too much, and that's polluting our seas and polluting our environment, which is really important. But the kind of sustainability industry has many, many different prongs, and we're just focusing on the carbon side of things.
Okay, let's presume, just to keep this simpler, because that's a valid point, right?
Yeah.
But let's presume they actually can show some menial 5% reduction in carbon, just some weird way that they're processing the plastic that has a reduction. Then what happens?
So what happens, and this is what our platform will do for you, is in the instance where you're buying plastic packaging, and you have two suppliers, what we can do is we can figure out, if you tell me you're buying 10 bits of this plastic packaging, then we will try and find a supplier specific emission factor. So the supplier who's producing recycled plastic that is 10% lower than industry average, they should be able to supply a supplier specific emission factor. And then what we do is we say, okay, so you bought 10 plastic packaging, and then we multiply that by your supplier specific emission factor. That is quite a big overview. It is quite a lot more complicated than that. Sure. And calculating supplier specific emission factors is quite hard. And it needs to be done for that very specific piece of packaging. But that's the kind of gold standard. That would be the best way to. That would be,
so that is not an offset. That's like, oh, okay, you carry that into, now my product has the plastic packaging for the certain volume of the packaging, volumetric stuff, right? That I can sort of perhaps say that I have that 10% accounted for. I guess the offset would be, oh, I have this product, it takes this much amount of carbon. And so then I buy some credits from some place that says that they put, trees or something or protect something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
I think in that example, I think what you were saying by your decision to purchase a a packaging which produces fewer emissions, that's what we want. We want people to be actively deciding to reduce their emissions. And that's the best thing. The kind of like final bit you should do for all the emissions you definitely can't reduce and definitely can't cut out, that's when you offset it. So any emissions you've got left over, that's when you would offset and, plant a forest or something. But offsetting is not the best thing to do.
Okay. So let's look at, you're just kind of, okay, let's look at Emitwise. So
yeah, I'm
a supplier now. I'm the guy making these plastics. I have this process that I know is like 10% less carbon. And I want to, how does my product get into this database that people are using to calculate their stuff? Like, there's some kind of probably standard reporting of my product, hopefully, right? Somewhere.
Yeah. So if you are a supplier, I think in this instance, you would be a supplier to one of our customers. So a lot of our customers are manufacturers, and one of them is a manufacturer of packaging. So this example works very well. And let's say our customer decides to buy your packaging because you say that you produce from your packaging, you produce 10% less emissions compared to the industry average. So what we would do then is that we work with our customer's permission, of course. We would work with you, the supplier, and we find out the units of packaging that our customers bought from you. And then what we would then ask from you is to have the emission factor that is produced from that one unit. And then what we would do is know so one unit produces 10 tons, well, no, that's a lot. One unit produces X kilograms of carbon. And then it's just a simple calculation of doing, so you bought 10 units, we multiply your emission factor by 10. And there are other factors to it. You need to take into account the weight of the packaging and everything like that. But if the supplier can prove that their emission factor is this, then we can use it.
Now, so what is it? Okay, so actually walk us through where where Emitwise, this sort of database product that you have, like where are you guys right now? You have manufacturing customers, they're tracking their orders through it from different suppliers. Does it help you find, like, if you hey, I'm buying this many units of something, but we haven't really looked into the marketplace for better options? Are you at that level where you can also offer or bring in potential suppliers for that?
Not yet. We can't yet offer a kind of alternative solutions.
You're more doing the calculation on the run. Like, okay,
so
you enter the data, you're keeping track of it in aggregate.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're really focusing on at the moment is being able to provide customers with a baseline data. So this is when you are setting carbon targets, and we align with science-based targets. I don't know if you've heard about them, but we engage with customers who are looking to align with science-based targets just because they really make the customer accountable, and they're kind of approved and ticked off by scientists. And when a customer sets a science-based target, it's showing, if we do this target, we are staying in line with the 1.5 degree mission, which we're all aiming for. So to set a target, you need to start with a really accurate baseline. Like, how can you measure something if you don't know what you're measuring it against? And how do you know what your carbon hotspots are without measuring it accurately? So that's our first stage, and that's what we're doing at the moment. We're focusing on providing really accurate and reliable and detailed carbon footprints for our customers.
Okay.
And the way we operate is we normally onboard a customer, we calculate their baseline year. They can then use this to set their targets against. Then once they've set their targets, they can then track their progress towards their targets within our platform. So as I said, what we normally do is we onboard a customer, we calculate their baseline year. So that's a full year's worth of carbon inventory. And then after that year, we would then follow one at the moment with quarterly reporting. And that's how you can kind of see the progress that you're making towards your target. And if you're going to hit it, and if you're not going to hit it, why aren't you hitting it? What are the biggest activities within your organization that is causing so much carbon? Or which office is producing the most carbon? Which supplier is producing the most carbon? So that's where we're focusing at the moment, is providing like a really accurate measure, because how can you know your progress without having an accurate measure? And then secondly, identifying those hotspots so our customers know where to act.
Okay, let's talk about the accurate measure parts of it, because I track how much I'm eating and how much I weigh, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not accurately tracking any of it, and I just keep forgetting the night snacking parts of it. So, but like,
the best part to forget.
Right, exactly. Like, it's off the books. It's off the books. But in this case, I mean, there's probably lots of areas that you're trying to simplify, and I should say this is a new company, so you can't do it all, right? I mean, how far are you in that measurement part? I mean, are you when the supplies come in, do the customers have to just enter, like, we ordered 100 pallets of X widgets, and that's what we ordered today? Is that still a manual process, or are you hooking that into other kind of, I don't know what you would call, what software the suppliers use in this world, but are you looking at connecting the existing ordering platforms and things like that?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a few points to cover here.
Okay.
Firstly, we measure the full footprint. So we are taking into account everything. And I think that's what's incredible. We get huge chunks of data, which is normally quite messy and unstructured. And by plugging it into our platform, we're able to structure a bit better, and the system can categorize each activity and then categorize which scope and which category it should be in when producing the carbon. So yeah, we take all the data. And part of my role at the moment, and also which we're building into the system, which is amazing, is identifying, okay, where are the gaps? Because this is something that's really important, and definitely something that I've learned from my years of auditing, is you need to have a complete data set. You can't say, okay, we've got two offices, one is completely green, the other one runs on coal, but we're actually just going to ignore the one that's on coal. We don't allow that. You've got to be having everything, and also for it to be covering the full time period. So we do ensure we get a complete set of data. And then in terms of how we deal with that data, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are different levels of accuracy when you are measuring a carbon footprint. When we onboard a first customer, and as you can imagine, the more accurate we want to get, the more effort is needed, the more complex the calculation is. As with everything. So normally when we onboard a first customer, especially ones which haven't reported their carbon before, this is a completely new space for them. We find that they struggle to get complete sets of data, just because their infrastructure isn't in place for it. You can't ask for something that just simply isn't there. And then we also find, obviously, it's better to. So what we do in that instance is we start with the lowest level of accuracy, which is still accurate, and it's still in line with GHG protocol. In fact, the GHG protocol almost sets out these three levels, just because we appreciate how challenging it can be to reach the top level of accuracy. So we start at the bottom level, which is mainly based on their spend. So what we do is we get a dump of all their expenditure, which makes me very happy. Well, I don't know, very happy.
Really?
But it's me looking at expense listings again, which I spent 3 years doing. It's nice to know my 3 years of exams didn't go to waste. So we look at that, and we put that through our system. And what happens when we're with the spend-based approach, what happens is we look at the expenditure and then the amount they spend, and then we look at the supplier they bought from, and then what happens is we assign that supplier to an industry, the industry they are active in, and then from that industry we apply an emission factor. So what you would do, for example, let's say you buy, I don't know, 10 bars of chocolate from Cadbury's, and you'll be like, okay, so you spend £15 buying stuff from Cadbury's. Cadbury works in the confectionery industry. The confectionery industry, on average, produces X amount of carbon per pound.
Oh, that's how you aggregate. Okay, and then if Cadbury figures out a more efficient way that they're beating the market, they're going to report that. You do okay, let's just make sure that's actually true. Okay, it's true. Then that increases the accuracy then specific for that.
Yeah, pretty much. And then kind of what we do. So that's the kind of spend-based approach. And that's the most least accurate is the one I've been referring to. But it's still, right. Yeah, it's still.
But that's your baseline. Okay, least accurate, but it's the industry average. That's our baseline for now until proven otherwise. And hopefully accuracy means more efficiency when they pull in. Oh, because I was just going to ask you, like, I'm in Virginia here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm, Old Dominion. I don't, my energy, right? I get the energy bill. That's accurate data, but I don't know what the energy company, I don't know if they're using coal. I don't know if they're using, they're putting windmills off the coast here in the United. They're doing that, and it's a huge investment. So at some point, some of that energy is going to be more renewable versus the old way. And so so basically, you're going to take the energy that I used, the bill, and you're going to look at the energy industry in this region or part of the United States, set it against the average. And then if Virginia suddenly goes all renewables, I'll go, hey, Virginia just, they've reduced their carbon footprint substantially, that we should update this unit. And you're like, all right, prove it to me. Oh, look at these reports. Look at all this. Okay, now for you, from here on out, it'll include this reduction.
Yeah, pretty much. Energy is slightly different to when you're buying a good. So in our example of buying chocolate bars, as I said, the least accurate is using the spend. So you say I spent £15 buying chocolate, and this is the emission factor for the chocolate industry. As you can appreciate, the amount spent can really influence the carbon emissions. So for example, let's say Cadbury's did a 50% off, and instead of spending £15, I actually spent £7.50. If that's what I'm using to multiply my emission factor against, that will halve my carbon emissions. So the fluctuation in price can really fluctuate your carbon emissions. So that's why we say it's the lowest level. The level up is kind of what we were talking about earlier, was actually looking at the units bought. So in this instance, you say, I actually bought 10 units of Cadbury's chocolate. And then that doesn't fluctuate with price. And then you would find an industry average of, okay, so on average, one chocolate bar produces X amount of carbon. So if I bought 10 bars of Cadbury's chocolate, I can multiply it by that more accurate emission factor, as it's per chocolate bar rather than per pound.
Okay, per the product, per pound.
Per the product, per unit, yeah.
Per unit.
Then the level up from that would say, okay, great, I bought 10 bars of chocolate. Then we go into supplier specific emission factors. And that's when we say, okay, for Cadbury specifically, producing this specific bar of chocolate produces exactly this amount of emissions per chocolate bar. And then that would be the most accurate. And that is what we're aiming for.
Okay. So this actually gets you, it's almost like Emitwise helps you prioritize and organize yourself around this concept. Because you'll probably start with just simply the overall weight against, the average standard industry. But then you can start looking to see, well, hey, I spent a lot in energy costs, and I should just research if Old Dominion finally did something, right? Like with that, where the per unit might be a better factor because the suppliers made some efforts or something along those lines. Like it helps organize our efforts so that
Yeah.
you could spend, I mean, these are companies. The job is to actually produce the products or services that they need to sell, is that's the core business. So anything you can do to help them prioritize where they can get reductions is going to be key. They can go
Yeah,
quicker,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Bigger
Our
impact.
platform, yeah, our platform and our customer impact team really want to kind of, especially during the first year of onboarding, is really hold the customer's hand so they can understand the process they're going through. And so what we normally do with a new customer is we apply the spend-based approach, understand their baseline to begin with, and then we can then look at their spend based approach and look at their carbon footprint produced. And then that identifies the hotspots. And then we think, okay, so these are your top 5 suppliers producing the most carbon emissions. Why don't we try and work with them now to see if we can get it more accurate in terms of moving to unit based? And that's how we kind of help them. And yeah, the other thing to point out is we have access to great databases, and our platform is obviously kind of learning as we get more and more data. So we do take on the responsibility of kind of researching the right emission factor, and helping that, and that's what our platform does. It will just be in the instances where we are getting supplier specific emission factors, then obviously we would need to get that from the supplier.
Right. And work with them. So you kind of,
Yeah.
If you're a big company and your energy costs are one of your major, consumption thing, you could then, you have some leverage to go back perhaps to your suppliers and go, hey, we really need you guys to step up here because we could really do a big reduction.
Yeah.
And there's ways to negotiate around that. Okay.
Yeah. The energy side of it is actually a lot more simple to calculate, and a lot of the information is already available. Yeah. So we never use the spend-based approach for electricity because you always, more often than not, know the value, like the consumption in kilowatt hours. And then each state, each government produces the average emission factor for their country. And then you'll find, per kilowatt hour, and then you'll find a lot of energy suppliers do now in their annual reports, they produce their own emission factor. And then also there's this whole other world of getting green energy certificates, and it still holds, if a company buys a verified green energy certificate, we call them REGOs, that then can reduce the carbon that they've produced from their energy consumption. And that is recognized within the GHG protocol. That's all fine.
Now, can you maybe talk, you don't have to get specific with anybody, but in general, like if they're looking to get more efficient with their consumption or usage carbon, but they're already, most businesses are always looking to figure out ways to be more efficient anyway, because that reduces overall costs. Does this all align? Has your software and these efforts also produced some unexpected results for these businesses?
In terms of saving money?
Yes, in terms of finding ways to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're still quite early in our journey. We kind of had, I think our longest customer has been on our platform for about 1.5 years now. Okay. But that is what we are proving. That's what what we're trying to prove is we will be, cutting your emissions, becoming more efficient is twofold. Like it does just make economic sense, right? If you can become more efficient, then you will save costs and also save money. I think there will just be that initial sunk cost of investing in the appropriate technology. You don't just become super efficient overnight. But going forward, that will definitely save you both in terms of energy and cost. And then I think, as you're aware, customers are really kind of taking the power back in terms of their customers' decisions. And given, the social media, everyone is so in tune with what is, what companies are doing. Companies are being held accountable now. And it's so easy to see what companies are doing now. And customers are choosing which companies to buy from. And it's not just from, okay, is this the cheapest one? I think, as you just said earlier, let's say you could buy some packaging which produced 10% less emissions, but it is a bit more expensive. You might be inclined to go with that one.
Especially if the products actually would last longer. It's like, I don't know.
Absolutely.
I buy so much stuff lately that I just feel like the stuff kind of breaks too easily. It's like everything's more flimsy these days because I'm like, that didn't last like even a year. Like, I don't understand, so I'm just wondering if maybe what I needed to do is just stop spending on the cheap stuff and, save a little bit more and buy something that's a little bit sturdier for things.
Absolutely. That's what I'm trying to live by. I try, and I think as a lot of kind of, mid-20s women, trying to stop our fast fashion habits and think, actually, why don't I just spend a bit more on a nicer pair of shoes, or
buy
a more
ones.
expensive pair of shoes, which are going to last me 5 years, rather than the £10 ones that I buy and they get ruined after one outing.
Right. Where does the AI play into, you guys are relatively new company. So where's the AI playing into right now with the product?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned earlier, the way we kind of assign emission factors is through industry averages and identifying what industry that supplier is associated to, what industry they are active in. And the same when we start looking at the product line. So the more data we get and the more kind of like manual classifying we do, the machine is learning, and it's learning, so this ad company relates to this industry, and that means that you get this emission factor. So that's where it's really playing into it. And then also, if I'm completely honest, I'm no machine learning expert. Sure. I am just a carbon accountant, but our engineers are amazing, and they're working really hard to bring in the kind of machine learning aspect of it. I work really closely with them. They're a hilarious team, and very, very smart, very clever. And they're really focusing on how we can bring in how we can kind of make that machine learning aspect of our platform even greater, and really build on it. But as I said, the more data we're getting in, the more it's learning, from what I understand. That's how it works.
I would argue, I would probably just imagine that the just tracking the amount of materials, the different suppliers, the different services, and the fluctuations as they improve, you probably need like monitoring around that, because just the catalog that you guys are amassing across each client, across all the suppliers, and some suppliers supply the same clients or supply different, but it's like a flywheel of data points that are evolving. And so there's probably some effort there just to be able to keep track of the changes so that it can bring you the attention from you guys into these areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly, like, everything does change frequently. As with like emission factors, I think you can view, they're almost a bit like inflation rates, they're constantly changing, or exchange rates, they're constantly changing. As our emission factors, especially kind of with your energy, the government releases new emission factors every 6 months, if not every year. And the databases we're pulling our emissions factors from, they're continuously being updated as we get more and more advanced in our technology and the way that emission factors can be calculated. They get updated. Our system is making sure that we're putting the most up-to-date emission factors, and also for the correct period, which I think is very important.
Maybe we can have one of those guys in at one point, because I'd be curious to know more about how they're wrestling with that particular challenge of just moving targets.
They're a great bunch.
Where's the sweet spot in terms of current customer base? Like, when you start a business, you hope to get a break. You hope to get that case study with a group that takes a chance. No large company wants to be the first. They don't want to be the guinea pig in this test. But on the other hand, there's probably a lot of pressure for some of these companies to do something, right? So it's once you get that one big company, it's sometimes easier than to go down that vertical in that world they're in, because you have a case study that others, like if you bring somebody to do a demo, you're like, we did this for this company that you probably recognize some aspect of
Yeah.
their business, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we're really focused in on the manufacturing industry. I think that they're facing a lot of pressure at the moment as people start to look at their supply chain and thinking, okay, I'm buying this product. My manufacturer is producing this. That's not good. So that's what we're focused on. And I think our case study, which you're kind of referring to, is we partnered with Pregis about, well, it must have been about a year and a half ago. It's before I joined. And they are one of the main suppliers of packaging for Amazon. So we've been working with them for a couple of years now, and our relationship with them is really strong. And it's been amazing to see what we can do with them. That's kind of our main case study that we can refer to.
you can refer to. Just curious to know then, you were working, just going back to your history, you were working at PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Yeah.
And then what was the moment when you decided, okay, I'm going to leave this big company and take a chance with the startup world? Like, what was the thing that flipped the switch for you? Like, all right, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I had always wanted to work in a sustainability focused tech startup. I just thought the culture really suited me. I read Sheryl Sandberg's autobiography. I believe she was the COO on Facebook.
Yes, lean in or lean forward or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, lean in. I read that, and there was a part she wrote on it when Mark obviously approached her to ask her to join Facebook. And she said, I was faced with this decision. I was in a very stable job. And she kind of phrased it as, you can either, get on a ship and, it'll be steady sailing and you'll end up in a destination and it'll be reliable and it will be kind of quite predictable. Or you can get onto a rocket ship, which will accelerate you into the unknown and would be very exciting. And I thought, I want to be on that rocket ship. And to me, PwC was that, steady sailing ship. It's great, nothing wrong with it. I know where I'm going to be, in 10 years' time. But for me, I wanted that excitement. I wanted to be on my rocket ship. And for me, Emitwise was that rocket ship. And then I think specifically with the Emitwise, it was just the co-founders. The co-founders have been some of the most inspirational leaders I've ever met. And obviously, kind of coming from my background, I've met a lot of experienced leaders, but they've been incredible. Their passion and their drive is crazy. And they just really hooked me in, and they've really built this amazing culture of learning and being vulnerable and being there for everyone, but also passionate. And we all know that the climate crisis is coming, is here, and we are running out of time to act. So, we are relentlessly focused, but we are also kind of very caring and we lean in for each other. So that's why I wanted to switch to Emitwise.
Did given your background in PwC and just learning about how large companies, I think Emitwise got an awesome, person like you, because they can at least now lean, well, what's it like at a scale that maybe sometimes startup companies, they have a good idea and they want it, and it's a solid one for a particular marketplace, but like implementing to scale, there's several rungs in that process that you really just got to have somebody that has some experience to tell you, like, oh yeah, once you get to 100 employees, you got to do XYZ structure or whatever, right? And so having people that have worked at large companies and then jump on, that's a huge asset, I would argue.
Definitely.
But for you, given that you're an accountant, like what, there's a 100,000 startups, around the world that are happening every day, that have great ideas. But what are the macro market environment, aside from the climate changes coming? Like, what is it that looked good for a platform like this to you? Like, what was it that sort of showed, oh, there's going to be more customers here to service?
Yeah, so as I said, definitely the co-founders. But another aspect which really struck me was the partnership between engineers and carbon accountants. I think a lot of people could be like, oh yeah, easy, I can calculate carbon. I just take my input plus an emission factor that gives me my carbon. When really it's a lot more complex than that. And it showed, it really hit home with me that Emitwise prided themselves on their carbon accountants and their expertise and getting the experts in. My other carbon accounting leads, I hear about their roles and what they've done previously, and their knowledge base just absolutely blows my mind. And they work with our engineers on a daily basis and our product team on a daily basis to ensure that our carbon calculating platform will be the best and will be as accurate as possible. So that's what really struck me, to be honest.
They're building the foundation right, and it's very hard now.
Absolutely.
In this, like, software startup world. You need a few $1 million to really capitalize things. I mean, like if you look at, I don't know, Mashable, you look at new startup companies in Silicon Valley, they're, nothing's under $5 million really. I mean, it's very rare unless it's like a weird consumer product thing or some kind of app. It's not easy. You really got to capitalize that. And so that just takes the people that have capital, that actually understand the market, that can see the opportunity. That's just hard to find. So I think if you feel this confidence in your co-founders and they are investing in the engineering and the carbon accountants like you guys, it sounds like a really good position to be in. And I wish you guys the best, because I think this is the kind of, it's software like this that's just going to make it easier for people to find like the future opportunities, right? Eventually they'll figure out the standards. Eventually they'll start to compel other companies. You have to accurately take this. And it sounds like that's a good spot to already then be in, if you have some engine already pre-built for that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the bet.
Definitely.
That's the Emitwise bet. Emitwise.com. That's a good place to go check it out. Lizzy, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me ask a bunch of questions.
My pleasure.
What's it like?
It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, totally. Take care. And thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. And all you guys that are new, subscribing, man, thank you so much. Appreciate that on the YouTube channel. Take care, everybody.
Visit throughthenoise.us for more episodes and subscribe to our newsletter. This show is produced by Through the Noise Consulting, uniting external communications and internal IT functions to ensure data and privacy are protected while creating innovative communications platforms. Want to start your own podcast? We can help. Visit getthroughthenoise.com to learn more.